Rees Mogg, are you on manoeuvres?
No, of course I'm not, and you've given me this splendid backdrop photoshopped in
Well,
the
you're
door
already
of
at number
Downing
10.
Street.
You're already in
which
Downing Street.
I haven't become the BBC's special Downing Street correspondent.
Not yet.
I think that would be a wonderful job to have.
Well, except you have to be impartial and balanced, of course, Jacob
Well,
Rees-Mogg.
I am, unlike many people in the BBC, but we'll let that go for a moment.
That's not true. So you're standing there in front.
Do you think this shambles in which we find ourselves is in any way a respectable condition? What do you think other countries are thinking going on here?
I think you are classically overstating what has in fact happened.
The Prime Minister goes into an election looking for a major mandate for the biggest constitutional change in recent history.
And you call it a shambles. You say that it's a butcher's slaughterhouse. This seems to me an extraordinary
you use
thing.
That phrase, not me.
No, that's what a shambles means, which I'm surprised you don't know. Most uncharacteristic. Treasury was worse. It said there would be between 500,000 and 800,000 jobs lost purely on a vote to leave, not actually anything happening,
and
just
the BBC?
on the vote. Dear old auntie. The BBC, how many times have we heard in spite of Brexit? In spite of Brexit, a record 3 million jobs have been created since 2010. In spite of Brexit, unemployment is its lowest level since 1975. In spite of Brexit, England defeated the West Indies at Lord's. I mean, it is... it is again and again.
Have you, can you actually specify an occasion when you've heard that? You say that, but have you actually, have you got a quotation?
I've got some other quotations.
Now, have you got a quotation saying in spite of Brexit?
Well, you just have to listen to the news.
Well, that's a generalisation. Have you got a specific...
No, I think anyone who's listened to the news recently has heard the in spite of Brexit terminology. And I think the audience knows that. Well, yes, the audience seems to agree. But the Sun...
No, they're shaking their heads there.
You found one. The Sun may not please everybody. I used to live not a million miles from Slough with the aeroplanes going over, and I must confess they didn't prove too bothersome then.
Eton, was that?
That's absolutely right. I was at school with your son.
Fantastic.
The risks of a leave vote could possibly include a technical recession, didn't it? Not a recession. What's he actually said that's upset you?
He warned that there would be a technical recession, but that is a recession.
A technical recession isn't a recession, is it, actually?
Well, it's a technical recession.
It's a temporary recession, I think, isn't it?
All recessions have so far been temporary in the whole of history.
Well, that depends on the time scale.
A technical recession is 2/4 of GDP declining. And I think, dare I say it, that people who have had the good fortune that I've had and go to schools like Eton, where I was with your son, as I think many people know, when you... I'm now going to go to Tony and East Finchley, because you think Brexiteers are lying and the organisations are decent, so far away.
Well, that's not what I said. What I wanted to know was, you said at the start of your speech, the EU-funded CBI.
Yes.
Why did you say that?
Because it gets money from the EU for surveys that it carries out for them, and it's in their accounts.
It's less than 1%, isn't it?
It's in their accounts that they get money from the EU, and you don't get money from the EU unless you sign up to a contract saying that you won't do anything that damages the reputation of the EU. So the CBI...
Isn't true. You get less than 1%. 1% comes from the EU.
They get money from the EU. It's what I've said is correct.
How much money? It's less than 1%.
Well, it's part of their funding. It's part of their funding.
The funding is research. It's for research. It's ring-fenced.
Great. So
0.6%.
So thank you. So you've proved the point that the CBI gets money from the EU.
Yeah. Would you call any other organisation?
I'd happily say it about any other organisation that gets money from the EU. It's an important part of their work. And they're constantly pro.
1%.
They're constantly pro the EU. The CBI told us we had to join the euro. They were in favour of the exchange rate mechanism. They're a very good counter-indicator of what the best policy is. If the CBI says it, it's almost always wrong.
EU-funded CBI.
That's what I said, and I said again.
Yes. But it's not really. You wouldn't call any other organisation...
Yes, I would.
They're funded by, when it's less than 1%.
They are funded by the EU.
Much more.
I didn't say they were fully funded by the EU, but thank you. I'm very grateful that you've made it clear to all the listeners on LBC that the CBI is funded by the EU. Extremely grateful. Thank you very much. But if you want to give a great boost to Mr. Trump's campaign, ban him from coming to the UK, because it would run so badly in the US. They would think the UK had no business banning an American presidential candidate. It would boost his support. It would mean that somebody who we think it will be difficult to deal with, who was friends of Mr. Morgan and Mr. Putin, so he keeps very fine company.
That is a low blow, Rees Mogg.
I meant it in a friendly way.
Are you likening me to the Russian dictator?
Well, you're a very powerful figure.
Yeah,
Peter in Cambridge, you're through to Jacob Rees Mogg. Go ahead. Oh, you're right. Do you need some water? Have you got water? You're right. OK. Peter, go ahead with your question. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Rees Mogg, you're the great Brexiteer, I understand. Personally, I think that you are probably the biggest hypocrite
thank you.
I've ever known.
I'm very grateful. That's quite an accolade, considering all the many hypocrites there are in the world.
What's the charge sheet, Peter?
Well, the charge sheet is quite simple. Can Mr. Rees Mogg explain why his own company has relocated and is relocating to Dublin, which in my view will be part of the EU, whether England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland are part of Brexit or not?
We haven't relocated to Dublin.
What are you doing in Dublin then with your new office?
We don't have a new office in Dublin.
Is this about Somerset Capital Management?
This is Somerset Capital Management. It doesn't have a new office in Dublin. It has a fund in Dublin. We have funds all over the world because we have funds in America, we have funds in Australia, we have funds in Singapore. We have funds globally to meet the requirements of our investors. And lots of investors like to have a structure that is in an independent jurisdiction. And that's why we've set up a Dublin-based fund. But I set up a Dublin fund in 1993, long before the UK thought of leaving the European Union.
But has this been a fresh one you've set up?
This is a fresh one, but it's been...
Within the last, few months?
But it's been in the pipeline since before we had the vote on leaving the European Union.
That's how long ago it was planned?
Yes,
and
that's
the
right.
HQ, I'm sorry, I don't know, where is your HQ? Is it London?
It's London.
Yeah.
We've got a London office and a Singapore office. We won't have a Dublin office,
Right.
but we have funds in all sorts of jurisdictions to meet the needs of our clients. Nothing to do with Brexit, and I'm afraid this chap doesn't know what he's talking about.
Peter, quick, I must allow him a response, though. Peter, quick response.
Well, I know differently, actually, because we know full well that he's actually setting up an office in Dublin. We know full well that that's to cater for the EU side of things, and I'm not going to change my view. I think you're an absolute hypocrite.
All right,
And
but Peter,
also,
let me just say this to you. It's very interesting to hear you on the radio. And you come on and you bandy around charges against politicians. You then listen to the answer and you say you know something that simply isn't true. So can you find some evidence for us setting up an office in Dublin? And can you then send it in? There is a fund we're setting up in Dublin, as we have funds in other parts of the world. If you're going to make aggressive charges, don't you think it's not a bad idea to try and get your facts right first?
All right, Peter. Remember, Mr. Rees Mogg is back in 2 weeks, and I'm sure, were you able to get any evidence, he'd be willing to discuss it with you.
The American dream has never quite delivered anyone to be the top of America other than to be married to the top of America.
Mrs. Clinton would have been in exactly the same position.
Well, of course, but...
She'd got the presidency, it would only because she was married to Mr. Clinton.
Oh, my God, she was a politician within her own right. She was a human rights lawyer. She was an amazingly well-qualified...
She was a complete...
Compared to this shyster.
She was a complete coat tailor, and the American people in their wisdom rejected her. God bless them.